Dave, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. My name is Dave Schrader, and I'm a lifelong
Excellent.
paranormal experiencer. Something wrong?
No, I was just testing my mic volume for a second there. The thing wasn't
Oh,
showing
okay.
up, so
Yeah, and I've been in radio for 17 years now, and married my love of radio with my love of the strange and supernatural, and have taken it out as a paranormal podcast for 17 years. I just started a new one this past March called the Paranormal 60. I've been on TV shows like Ghost Adventures, Paranormal State, and then the Holzer Files and Ghosts of Devil's Perch, and now I'm appearing on your show. So see, I get around.
nice, nice. I don't. I just sit in this chair. I was born in this chair. I will die in this chair. This chair is my life. Um, but
Way to
so tell
set
me more about.
goals.
Yeah. The joke is that it's actually just a sentient chair. I'm just like a wart on the chair or something. I think that's the thing now. So I am an atheist, super hardcore materialist naturalist, and so I don't believe in any supernatural, paranormal things.
Mhm.
Could you tell me more about your position on those things? What evidence there is for them? Why you research these things, and what evidence would potentially convince other people?
It's always kind of a big scope question. How do you explain the sky to somebody who's blind? And that's not a sentiment where it's besmirching you. It's just I had strange experiences growing up throughout my entire life that I just didn't understand and couldn't complain or couldn't not complain. I couldn't understand or really
Explain.
explain. Yeah, that's a word. Sorry, I'm fighting COVID over at my house, so I got a little bit of the brain fog going. um, so just researching, looking into weird stories, finding weird threads and strange rabbit holes to fall down. I grew up in a Lutheran environment, went to a Lutheran grade school, so I had, religion was a big part of my life for a long part of my life. So it's just kind of one of those uh, things where I can't pinpoint or specifically say this is evidence, this is 100% proof that the afterlife or God exists, but I can, speak to the experiences I've had, what they meant to me, why I believe them to be something above the natural. So where would you like me to start on that?
Yeah, the above the natural part sounds great. That's because I'm a naturalist, so I think
Sure.
naturalism is the fundamental nature of reality.
Well, when my grandmother died, I was barely 2.5 years old. So I didn't have a concept of life or death, didn't really understand her not being there. And when I would go to stay at my grandfather's house after her death, she would come to visit me and she would read stories to me. Now, I have no memory of this. I'm going to be honest with you. This is family legend and lore passed down. But I would come back and tell my mom or my aunt stories, things that my grandmother had said to me. And being that young, it was stuff that I didn't know, couldn't have known, and things that was, you know, kind of off-putting to them to have this little kid sharing information that I had no, prior knowledge of. So again, that's me taking on face value that my mom and aunt were relaying the story properly to me as I grew up and had those memories. But that opened up the Pandora's box of trying to explore and understand how and why these things appear to occur to people. Doing my paranormal talk show for 17 years, I have a lot of people that ask, do you really believe all these stories people share with you? No, I don't. I don't believe in all of them. I believe that they may be very real to you, but I think what's equally as fascinating as the story is why you believe the things you believe and what brought you to those moments. All I can say is I grew up in a house that had strange experiences. When we were downstairs, you could hear footsteps and talking upstairs. And this was something that my mom, my father, and I all witnessed. You'd be upstairs and you'd hear things knocking around downstairs and footsteps and up the stairs and down the stairs. I don't know how to explain what was going on when there's only three of you that live there and you're all in the same room and things are making noises in other parts of the house. Now, aside from, natural environment of floors settling and old houses and things like that, you give some of that away. But when it's in a continual pattern of footsteps and it goes up the stairs and 10 minutes later goes back down the stairs, and then you can hear it walking across the floor, I don't really understand how nature plays into that. What is creating this phenomena that's giving us the effect of footsteps up and down the stairs? Settling, you would think that the stairs would maybe make that popping noise going up, but not 10 minutes later contracting and going back down again. So, those are some of the weirder aspects of moments that we shared in that house.
So when I hear those kinds of stories, the first thing that comes to mind is bereavement delusions. It's a really common phenomenon among people, especially when it's near when you have a loved one die. People will
Mhm.
report seeing, hearing, touching the dead loved one after the occurrence. And I think
Right.
that that can be fully explained by psychological features in our brain. We Because of neuroplasticity, we are pattern building. And so when you experience a pattern enough, that pattern is ingrained in your brain to activate under certain conditions. And so if you think of like your grandmother who always used to read newspapers by the door or something, and you wake up in the morning and you walk to the door, you can psychologically get stimulated to have the same sensations, auditory, visual sensations,
Mhm.
as if she was really there, because it's happened so often because of the surrounding stimulus. Your brain, most of what you see is a conglomeration of what your brain is doing that isn't actually there, because the only thing your brain is really processing is like if you hold up your thumb, it's about that much area of direct line of sight. And so for me, those things seem to be better explained by the brokenness of the human brain because of evolution. It selects for a lot of crazy stuff. There's tens of
Sure.
thousands of fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions, all kinds of things. And so
But with that said, you're assuming that this is a house that somebody died in. My grandmother died when I was 2.5. We lived in that house when I was 7. There was no correlation or ties to that. There was nobody that died in my life or in my parents' life for the majority of the time we lived in that home. So it wasn't moments of bereavement that would cause us to snap into this delusional context. The other thing is that one person hearing things, I firmly believe you are correct. You're misinterpreting. But when there are 3 people in the house and you all stop because you can hear clear footsteps, and as I watch your chat say raccoons, squirrels, well, I know we didn't have raccoons in our basement because I lived in the basement. There were no squirrels in our basement. And these things would have had to been wearing combat boots with the footstep sounds that they made. So I get your concept, and I'm firmly agree with you in the fact that I think a lot of experiences that people have, including things like dream visitations and things after death, can be attributed to the grieving process and our want and desire to not let go of the things that we've lost. But when you're in a place that has no death associated, it's not an anniversary of a death, and multiple people are experiencing these things, I would have friends spend the night and they'd hear it as well without me prompting them. So those are the kind of instances I refer to as above the natural, things that went beyond natural understanding or explanation. So again, looking at it through and I'm being completely honest with you, I'm what I refer to as a skeptical believer. I've had enough weird experiences. I can't dissuade myself to believe that they're all mistakes, but I also know that we review things through the eyes of childhood or the past in a certain way. And I always refer to the TV show Land of the Lost when I grew up. I love that show. Used to wake up every Saturday morning early to watch Land of the Lost. And when it finally came out on DVD 30 years later, I bought the series because I had such love and wonderful memories of the show. And I put it on for my kids, and we sat through the first 5 minutes of it, and all of us looked at each other like, what is this garbage? Because the perception of my youth was colored through that filter, and there was enough time and separation. So I understand those aspects of our flaws and our memories. But when we're hearing communication, we're having people talk with us from the other side, voices that are heard audibly in a house. There's not a radio or television set on, and suddenly a voice is heard. I don't understand exactly what's causing that. I don't claim that it's always spiritual in nature, but what else would explain away what just took place?
well, yeah, so that's why I brought up bereavement delusions as the starting point, because those
Mhm.
apply to people even if they then no one's died, because bereavement isn't about literally having someone die. It's about a powerful emotional experience, and different kinds of
Mhm.
powerful emotional experiences, both happy, sad, whatever, can cause different kinds of these hallucinations. And it does happen to multiple people. So that was one of the things I also originally was researching, was like, can people share hallucinations? And the answer is yeah. There's a name for it.
Yeah.
It's called folie à deux, and there's 3, 4, 5. They're all just the French words, tray, whatever, of the number of people who experience it. And there's a specific version called communal reinforcement,
Mhm.
where if you hear something or see something you can't explain, somebody will apply an explanation to it, like, oh, it was the
Right.
Mother Mary in the sky. And then everybody will psychologically, if they already believe that, their brains will um, coalesce that information to make it fit their worldview until they all think, yes, it was the Mother Mary. And so that's how you get sightings of like the miracle of Fatima, where thousands of people saw the Mother Mary, and really it was just an optical illusion from staring at the sun too long. And so there are many kinds of illusions that are shared among people. It's actually relatively common. Bereavement illusion is one of the most common ones that is in fact shared, where people will see and hear the same things of a dead loved one when nothing was there, because of the same priming in their brain, that they've experienced the same pattern of this person multiple times. And so they will experience the same activation of the parts of the brain, whether it was sound or hearing or touch or whatever, of whatever pattern that happens to be. And so it can be shared among groups of people. Same with like Ouija boards, different kinds of spooky experiences in a house. Something happens they can't explain, one person applies an explanation to it, and if the other people trust that person or see them as an authority or trust in the ideology or the explanation and think it's rational, they will their brain will automatically fit that information into their worldview, and so they will have a shared communal delusion. And so all of those things seem to be very well explained by possible explanations in psychology. And I think that even if we granted the sound was real, 100% definitely, you guys heard it for sure, it was a
Mhm.
real thing, I don't understand why we would then go from that to it's the spiritual or something beyond nature. Like maybe, like why would it be more rational to posit a supernatural entity rather than just an unknown natural entity? Why not just say it's something just we don't know what it is, but it could just be natural. We just have no idea what it is yet.
Well, you already answered that question because we as people like to pigeonhole things. We like to have an explanation. We like to have something that makes rational sense to us. And for people who grew up watching A Christmas Carol at the holidays and sightings and In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries, you begin to apply scenarios that have been given to you. I had an interesting dialogue with Dr. Michael Shermer from Skeptic Magazine, and he said a very similar statement to you. Why do we have to ascribe it any title? It's just something weird that happened. Well, that's not who we are as people. We don't just go, "Huh, that's a weird thing," and there's no need to understand it. That's not who we are. That's not how we discovered, the King Tut's tomb or the moon. We push beyond just, oh, yeah, okay, I'll accept that's weird and move on. We want to know and see more. So until something changes that paradigm, we continue on that pathway. I've always been open to the fact of believing that uh, you have to be adaptable to these. And I've learned, yeah, okay, obviously orbs and photographs are nothing more than dust particulates, moisture, bugs. And people send me video constantly. Oh my God, look at this strange vortex twirling in my front yard. I captured it on my Ring camera. And I tell people, go out by your Ring camera. Are there any cobwebs? Well, yeah, what's that got to do with it? I said, well, what happens is the cobwebs will blow in front of the lens and the IR light is lighting it up and it appears to make some kind of phantom like thing dipping around your yard. So I've been able to adapt on something that 20 years ago I might have looked at and gone, holy, it's a ghost. Because we learn and we adapt and we alter our perceptions with the information that we're given. But I also don't believe in summarily dismissing all experiences as well. There's probably a rational explanation. Well, there's probably a rational explanation. We've only known of gorillas now for what, 200 years. There were talks of it, legends and lore, and people would roll their eyes and laugh about these large bipedal hairy hominids that were seen in the woods until we found one. And the coelacanth was dead and gone, and it doesn't exist until we found one. And UFOs are things of imagination. things that people are misidentifying in the sky. And then we find out the government is still looking into it. And they do have video that they cannot explain, and they're not comfortable giving us a definitive answer. I understand there's going to be different categories within the categories for the US government as well, saying we're not going to identify that, yes, they're aliens, but we also don't want to just throw out, oh, yeah, they're the Russians and Chinese spying on us, because we don't want people to feel uncomfortable within our own borders. If we leave the innocuous statement of we're not sure what it is, we're not pigeonholing ourselves into a situation and then have to answer questions. We can now open a quote unquote investigation into it. But there have been so many people from the military that have come forward, NASA astronauts that have seen things that they cannot explain away. And you can't just, well, they were in outer space and, he saw a piece of the rocket fuselage in the background and assume that was it. These guys were the best of the best. They knew what their craft looked like. They'd know what's floating out behind them in space. So I think that we're at a point where new discoveries are taking place. We're at a point where even the government and science is willing to extend and go a little bit beyond the parameters of the normal to try to understand what's out there. And like cryptozoology, it's only a cryptozoological creature until we discover it. Then it becomes zoological. So you're right. These may be natural happenstance, and they may be that, but until then, they still fit into that realm of the preternatural or supernatural for most of us, because there is no known explanation. And it's kind of a mystery that keeps us guessing and excites. It's something that, instead of sitting at home playing chess on my computer, I prefer to go out into an old creepy place and look around and see this piece of history and learn the history of the location and hear the stories that people have to share. And is there anything to it? Do I see, hear, smell, feel anything in this location that matches up with what the history would have been, or what other people have experienced there? And I also understand that, having been front loaded with that history, I am now predisposed to possibly have a similar experience. But that if you go to the circus, and I tell you, I saw clowns at a circus, and you walk in the circus and see a clown, you're not hallucinating, because that's where clowns would be, right? At the circus. So going into a haunted location, if people tell you their experiences, I can't summarily dismiss the fact that because I saw something, I have to dismiss it because I was probably front loaded from somebody else. It's got a reputation for a reason. And there are weird photographs that have been captured long before the advent of good Photoshop and things like that. So, we can't just dismiss. I don't claim to have the answers to specifically what they are, how it's created, but that's the fun for me, is continually pushing and trying to find those answers, talking to people with scientific knowledge. On my show last night, I had a gentleman on who's a former, he's a Navy vet. He worked at a nuclear facility. There are all these claims that UFOs are seen hovering over nuclear facilities, probably filtering off energy. And he came on to lay the science on us, how that's impossible or improbable, that that's what's going on because of the shielding that takes place, and that in space above a nuclear facility, there's less nuclear particulates or issue than there would be a natural, measurement up there that would be there if this location didn't exist. So I like learning and finding these aspects out, and that starts to put other pieces of the puzzle together. So when it comes to things like, being an atheist, not believing in this, being a naturalist, that's cool. But to me, that's boring as hell. I'd rather love the mystery of life and get out there and experience something that, puts things to the test. If people tell me this is what happens, let's go see what happens. How do we just dismiss that? And then if it's captured on photograph and audio, that's an interesting element to me. What more can we push to now understand, where did that come from? What level of audio was that recorded? Is there a way to tap into that parameter to see if there's more that's heard there? And if there is, does that mean that we're having auditory hallucinations, or there's a sub signal that's capturing your voice 3 houses down, and it just happens to be riding that wave and allowing me to hear it, which sounds conversational? That to me is equally as exciting as it's a ghost. And to be 100% honest with you, T-Jump, what my beliefs were 20 years ago and what a ghost was and what they are today are two radically different things. I can't put a label on, oh yeah, it's dead grandma walking around my house. Now I don't know. I love all the philosophies and theologies behind what they could be, and I love to keep investigating each one to see if it bears fruit. And I'm equally happy walking out of a place going, man, that was crazy. I can't explain what we just saw or what we just heard, but that was exciting. That was a holy moment. And that's, those are the bits I live for. I don't feel I need to, and this isn't meant just for you and your audience, but I never feel like I need to prove anything to anybody. I'm only out for myself. And I've been open about that since my journey began. I just want to have a cool moment for myself. I want to have something, see something, be a part of something. And if it happens, great. And I've been in locations that have these amazing histories, and I get in and nothing takes place. And then I've been in places that are not known to be real haunted, and something moves in front of my eyes. So I'm just open to the moment and having the experience. I wish I could give you and other followers of yours a specific, hey, this works. I know this is how this happens. I think if anybody comes out and definitively tells you without any doubt at all, they're delusional. And that's coming from a guy who's seen ghosts and and heard voices and seen these things, but I don't claim to have the answer of how or where they came from.
Yeah, so I would agree with a lot of what you said there. I think that exploring every hypothesis, especially if it's fun, is always a worthy endeavor. So I
Right.
think that if anything cool happens, you should go check it out, see what it's like, even if it may or
Right.
may not be true. Like, who cares? Like, drugs are fun. Doesn't matter if what you're seeing is there or not. And I think that we should always be open to trying
That
those
should be a
things.
slogan. Drugs are fun.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure it is. I think
Oh,
most.
is it? I've never heard that before. I'll have to examine it.
But I think like my concern is more like, should we genuinely believe it's true until it's been put through a methodology that is reliably can differentiate imagination from reality? That's the part I'd say is like, it's fun in the same way a haunted house is fun. Like something we should probably
Mhm.
think there's no ghosts in there. There's no actual axe murderers in there. It could be a cool sensation or fear that we get from it, but
Right.
definitely we should not believe it until it's been tested with some really reliable methodology. And I think science is the best methodology we have, novel testable predictions.
Mhm.
And so from my perspective, I think that all the paranormal and alien stuff is really interesting and fun to investigate. Bigfoot, love the Bigfoot guys. Super cool
Mhm.
going out into the forest and looking for that kind of stuff. But I don't think that the approach that is taken could ever be good enough to justify belief in the thing. I think that you would need something
Agreed.
much stronger. You would need some kind of scientific proof, DNA samples, fossils,
Well,
something
and
that you can
that's
show.
that's the problem we have though, right? I mean, science itself battles itself constantly. There are new changes in history and in science that are uncovered. But we are so stoic about our beliefs that even though science is proving this is real, there are a large portion of science that will stand back and go, I don't know about that. Well, we just, here's this is how we did the experiment. Yeah, but I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? This is, and in history, they refuse to change aspects of history, even though we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this actually took place, and here's how it went down. Because well, that's not what we've taught all these years. So the problem is we end up where our country has ended up for the last 6 years. Who do you believe, and where
Well,
do you come down on this? And
quick question on that, because
science,
that part
sure,
I'm more interested in. Like, I think from most of my studies, science is very, very quick to adapt to new information. So,
right?
quick example I can think of: Einstein, general and special relativity. He said some crazy, crazy shit. Time and space
Hmm.
are physical things and they can bend. Most philosophers were just laughing at him, like time
Right,
isn't a physical thing; it's an abstract concept. But then he made the testable prediction about light curvature around the sun, observed it, confirmed it. 6 months later, he's world famous because the scientific community is like, yep, he got it right. We're wrong. And
right.
so the ability to self correct and change and battle itself, I think, is a
But look
positive
how
thing.
long it takes and how destructive it is in that nature. It's not, Einstein, that's an interesting posit. Let's look into it, examine it further, and see if these are testable and believable examples. Instead, it's he's nuts, he's stupid, he's ridiculous. What a fool. Why are we listening to him? Oh, yeah, he was right. Right. Same thing happened to the guy that discovered that ulcers were caused by a bacterial infection. He went to a medical convention. He was revered. He tells this tale, shows how it is, and he is laughed out of the industry. They rip him to shreds until they find out, oh, yeah, it's a bacterial infection. But by that time, the damage is done. The elite have smashed the people that they didn't like or didn't want to follow for a while. So it gets really hard for new examples to always be shown because people are so quick to be destructive and saying, instead of saying, okay, let's examine this.
Well, I don't see those as separate things. I think those are the same thing because the way science works is everybody has their own bias. They have their
Right.
pet theories.
Right.
I want my theory to be right. I want your theory to be
Exactly.
wrong. And
Right.
so what makes science so effective is that when I present my theory, every other scientist is going to try to destroy it as hard as
Right.
they can.
Sure.
Um, and what makes it successful is if they can't. And if they can't and they check it and they're like, this is testable, repeatable, he was right, I was wrong. That methodology of presenting an idea and having every other scientist try to destroy it as best as they can is the most reliable way to filter out all biases, the most reliable way to discover truth. And so when someone does present a new idea like Einstein or the ulcers guy or Boltzmann and his atom theory, the goal of the scientist is to destroy it. They should be trying to destroy it. That's what they're
Right.
supposed to do.
But
And
there's a
then if
difference
they
between
can't,
trying to destroy and de-evolve the science so that they can understand it better and destroying the person who presents it.
yeah,
That makes others not so likely to want to step up with an idea or, if they do, it can cost them their careers, and that to me is devastating. And you start, buying into some of the conspiratorial theories of, there is more money in keeping us sick than there is in healing us. And you see these things and, oh, that sounds ridiculous. Of course, science wants to heal us. Well, sure, a portion of it does, but a portion of us wants to just keep us addicted to the medications that will mask the symptoms as opposed to healing the symptoms. And I think the problem with the paranormal, well, I know the problem with the paranormal is we'll never be taken seriously because within our own group and field, if you will, no one can agree on any baseline. There is no, okay, here's the basics. Now let's build from there, test those points. Everybody is, this is my way. T-Jump investigates like an idiot. That guy's stupid. He's doing it this way. That we are the ones that do it the right way. When you can't even come to a baseline, and at least science says, okay, we can agree upon this. We can loosely build upon this and then test those theories. In the realm of the paranormal, there is no cohesive nature between the investigators. And that's because 99.9% of investigators are weekend warriors that have no interest or want or desire for real science, although they say that they're investigating in a scientific method or way. All they're doing is waving the same pieces of equipment around they see on TV. That's not scientific because they don't even know most of the time what the pieces of equipment they hold do, how they are supposed to work, and what they're truly measuring. So it's kind of a weird world I'm a part of, but there's flaws in every interest, right? I mean, wherever you go.
well,
But going
I
back to,
don't see
go
the
ahead.
when you mentioned that science makes fun of the person. Now, that was definitely true. That definitely has happened in a lot of
Oh
cases, but I
yeah.
don't think that's as true today because there are peer-reviewed academic journals of parapsychology. I've had some very prominent figures in that field on my show, and they are there are academic journals that will accept papers and have them peer-reviewed in these
Hmm.
fields that are well accepted by people in the field. We obviously don't think they're right, but
Right.
we do accept those ideas without criticizing the individual because of the double blind peer review process. And so I think
Hmm.
that today we are much more accepting of new papers and new ideas, even if they go against the grain. We're still going to try to attack the idea as much as possible, but not so much the person. And I see that in a lot of areas that creationists and many people who I debate with say, "Oh, it's just a conspiracy and they're just trying to keep us out." But I don't see that because anybody can publish a paper in an academic journal. Anybody can submit a paper for peer review and your name will be off of it. The names of your reviewers, they won't know who you are. All they're seeing is the information. And so I
Hmm.
don't think that bias exists as much today because of the way the peer review process work. Nobody knows who's publishing the paper. Nobody knows what's going into it,
Right.
the
But
biases.
do you know this? There are scientific labs that refuse to do genetic DNA testing on things if you identify that you believe this may be from a cryptid or Bigfoot creature. As soon as they hear it, they stop. We're not going to waste our time. That's not science. That's bias. We already don't believe it doesn't exist, therefore we're not going to test it. We're not going to make ourselves look foolish by, well, nobody else is going to know. It's me. I'm sending the sample to you. Nope, we're not going to do it. Well, here's the money to pay. Nope, we're not going to do it. Same with items that they believe may predate civilization or appear alien in nature. If they know the nature of your questioning, a lot of these won't happen. And I know that because I'm friends with people that are in the science field who have tried to send things in to be tested. And when they're asked, what is this? Where did you acquire it? Why are we testing it? What are we, and as soon as they refer to what they believe they may have, they're summarily dismissed. And that to me is not science. That's completely dismissive. And how can we continue to learn and educate? Hey, look, let's test it. You're paying for it. Nope, it's a chicken feather. It's not Bigfoot's nose hair. It's a chicken feather. Okay, now we know. And why not continue to do that? Why not give the answers if you have the time, the money, and the patience for it, and you're willing to keep paying? Why won't science continue to examine?
Well, I think they will, but I think the method that you're using isn't following the scientific method. Because if you want your stuff tested, submit in a peer-reviewed paper. That's what you need to do. Don't send it to the lab.
But
The
how can you
labs
do
are-
right? But how can you do a peer review paper on something you find? If I'm told, Dave, there is a UFO crash that took place in Anoka, Minnesota, in a wooded area, nobody's ever touched it. I go up there, and with a metal detector, I find strange pieces of metal that don't seem to make sense to me, with weird little hieroglyphs on it. I don't know how to write a peer-reviewed paper, and what am I going to write it on? Instead, I would want to send it somewhere to have it tested. What is this metal? What does it? Okay, now that I know we cannot explain this, now it gives me something to take the next step. I think that's where a lot of people come from when they're investigating claims of high strangeness, not having that ability or perhaps even the intelligence to write a paper that could be presented
that's the thing.
properly.
It's so easy to write and submit a paper. Like, it takes nothing. There are hundreds of these.
Okay.
It is not a super.
So what would a
academic requiring
paper look
process.
like? And I'm, again, not being combative with you, but if I find this piece after somebody tells me that, how would I go about writing a paper about something I don't even know what I'm holding? Wouldn't the idea be I have to test it first
Yeah,
before?
test it with your own equipment. So with any equipment you have. So in the case of a piece of metal, use electromagnetoscopy or whatever, just anything you can use and say, well, these are strange results. I get different results with this than I do any other metal. And then you just write that down. You say, I've tested it in this way. Here's what we get for like titanium and steel. And here's what we get for this object. It's different. This is weird. And then you publish those results or submit them to a journal. If the journal thinks it's acceptable in the methodology, they'll publish it and get people interested. And then the big journals will then take your sample and do all of the crazy, super expensive tests on it because you found an interesting result. So all you need to do is use your own backyard equipment. Like in DNA,
Mhm.
they got those kid things that in high school that there's little gel thingies that you can do DNA tests on. Just do that. And if you get a strange result, you can publish that. And then the bigger journals will be interested in your results and will try to double check it. So it doesn't take like
All
a
right, but with
super
that, now,
complicated thing.
one question. So on a DNA sample, I capture something, I can do one of these little basic genetic tests. I get a weird result that doesn't seem to match up immediately. Well, it's fallible because he's an idiot. He's a radio show host who did a DNA test at home. You can't trust this. And I don't know that I've got the right protocol in what I've collected. I picked it up with tweezers and I put it in a Ziploc baggie, but did the BPHA of the baggie change the chemical principle of this or that? Or did the worker who rolled the bag and stuck it in the bin change the parameters of that? There's so many different aspects. I think that's what overwhelms people that would be interested in taking this further. And I know it sounds like I'm just heaping excuses, but for the most part, people are lazy. People are afraid of being mocked or ridiculed, so a lot of them won't do this. And then when they see the ones that have, like Dr. Melba Ketchum doing the DNA analysis and having a veterinary background, having an understanding of animals, sending in something, her career was demolished because she just wanted to push further and get questions answered. And she did send out peer review, and she was annihilated instead of spoken to, instead of treated with any respect. And it was very, very strange. And that was just within the last 10 to 12 years.
Well, that part I find really hard to believe because the way the peer review process works is it's double blind. Nobody know your name isn't on the thing. They can't fire you.
Okay.
They can't ever tell anybody you submitted a paper because they don't know who you are. So it's
Gotcha.
impossible for you to submit a paper and then get fired unless somebody is doing something illegal. And so it's hard for me to
Well, and
believe that.
that's great information to know, and that's something that now I can take back to Dr. Melba Ketchup and push and say, "So explain to me how you turned in a peer-reviewed paper and then took flack for it. Is it because you turned it in and they refused to do it, and then you publicized the fact that they rejected the paper? So they didn't reject Dr. Melba Ketchum, they rejected your findings? That gives me more to build on." And you're right, that's laziness on my part. I should have looked into what it takes to do a peer-reviewed paper and what all goes into the expounding of investigating those peer-reviewed papers. We take a lot of these things on faith and face value that, okay, the scientist said they did this, here's the results, and look, everybody's tearing me apart.
Yeah, and I
Well,
would
did you
specifically,
put it out there?
yeah,
Did you, you know, if I'm gonna dress up in a pretty ballerina picture and post the picture online, I can't be all offended that people are going, "What do you look like an idiot. What are you doing?" Right?
yeah,
You've got to accept that if you're going to put yourself out there, you're gonna get kicked once in a while.
yeah, and I would specifically say look into the journals of parapsychology. I forget what its name is, but the YouTube channel New Thinking Aloud. There's a guy who actually
Mhm.
has the only legitimate PhD in the field that is a real actual PhD in parapsychology, that was accredited from like legit California university. So it's not just like a diploma mill. It was a legitimate PhD. And he has access and information to all legitimate peer-reviewed journals that are actually peer-reviewed in academia about parapsychology that accept these papers all the time. And so I would say, go to those, publish in those, do a double blind so people can't like know your name, and you will have a much greater opportunity to be able to present your papers to academia and get them peer reviewed by people in the field and who will actually test your results, your DNA results, your metallurgy results, whatever you want.
Mhm.
You just got to find the right places to do it.
Now, let me ask you, because I like picking brains on this as well. I grew up Lutheran, so I have a religious background and belief system. However, I'm also very aware that the Jesus story has been told and propagated through history, that there are at least four other Jesus characters that appear before Jesus with the same origin story, right?
More than that, yeah.
So, right, but I'm saying four that people probably would go, "Oh, Horus. Oh, really? What?" You write names that they would recognize,
Dionysus, Inanna,
right.
all the different dying and rising gods.
So
Yeah.
you've and that's a great, Bill Maher did that religiosity where he talks and breaks down a lot of that. I think that was fascinating and it was enlightening to me to see those aspects. But how does that then affect my belief? And what I've said is I think a lot more of what we do is about intention and manifestation than it is in a Jesus. That doesn't mean I've stopped believing, but I've stopped believing necessarily in the story that's been propagated to this point. And maybe he was just more of a teacher and an enlightened teacher who's been elevated because we as people have a desire and want to follow something, to believe in something greater than us. At least most people do. But then I've encountered things with prayer and healing requests that I cannot explain, that in my sense fit into a miracle style category. Like you said, Fatima, right? You've got 10,000 people staring at the sun and then they start hallucinating and seeing throbbing images and you've got floaters in your eyes that may be right in the right place, making it look like a face because pareidolia, and we want to see faces. We're made to recognize patterns. So you're right. But as an example, in the first year doing my show, Darkness Radio, I had a gentleman reach out to me. He goes, "Listen, I'm not religious in nature. I don't even know that I do this, but I see you post prayer and healing requests from time to time." And our mutual friend Cheryl had a massive asthma attack on New Year's Eve. They've just called in a priest to do last rites, and I'm just throwing up a Hail Mary. And we posted a prayer and healing request for our friend Cheryl, a lifelong asthmatic who was collapsed on New Year's Eve with this attack. We put out a prayer and healing request. 2 days later, she was at home. And now 17 years later, I talked to her. She said she's used her puffer like 3 times in 17 years. Now, is she lying to me? Maybe. But within 2 days of last rites, she's back on this side of the grass. And, it was thousands of people that came together sharing prayers and healing and positivity. Okay, coincidence. But I've seen it time and time again with situations included in my own life. My son was born prematurely, and his mom had preeclampsia. She was bottoming out. My son had was born 3 months premature. The doctor said, listen, your son is 3 months premature. That means he's here for at least 6 months, the 3 months till he catches up, and 3 months afterwards, probably longer, because he has to hit these milestones. And I'd put up prayer and healing requests just before he went in to be born. Both of them recouped insanely fast, and we were home within 2 weeks with my son. The doctors couldn't understand how at the age and stage he hit all of those levels within a 2-week span when they are expecting it to be at least 6 months, if not a year. So again, doctors are fallible. That's why it's called practice, right? They're always learning, they're always educating, and they find new things constantly. But when you see those things time and time again, how do you just dismiss that there's something more that appears to be going on?
Well, so spontaneous remission of diseases is actually really common. Pretty much every disease has a certain percent that will just go away. Asthma is a good example. Asthma, lots of people have asthma as childhood, but it just gets healed over time. And so asthma is a disease that can very commonly go into common remission that just goes away as you age, and it can go away at any time in life. The same thing happens to like very strange diseases. Cancer, stage 4, stage 5 cancer has a percentage of remission, just spontaneous remission, where you get better for no reason at all. And what we'd want to know is, like, if you were religious and it was affected by prayer, we would do a test that says, do people who pray under God X or whatever have a higher rate of spontaneous remission than people who don't pray, or people who are atheists, secularists, whatever? And so we can test those rates in different countries who are majority religious versus majority non-religious. And the Templeton Foundation has actually done these prayer studies on many different diseases and found out that it just happens at the same rate of chance. What we don't see is nobody's arm gets regrown. There's only one case of rabies who was ever recovered and survived. And so certain diseases, this never happens for. And so for these kinds of diseases, if you could pray and they would get better, that would be phenomenal evidence, because they just don't happen. But for the cases that they naturally go into spontaneous remission everywhere in the world, no matter what, in every society, and it happens for a particular person after a prayer is done, that doesn't seem to be evidence of the prayer. It just seems to be evidence that you happened to pray for the right person who was going to automatically get remission later. You just didn't know it yet. And so you made I forget what it is, a false positive association, where you think the prayer is what caused it, like a lucky rabbit's foot. If you shake a lucky rabbit's foot and you win the lottery, you think, oh, it's my luck, it's rabbit's foot, but not really, because the rate at which the lottery pays out, or the slot machines pay out, they have to pay out, I think, 80% of their earnings. And so somebody's going to win eventually. And whatever strange method they're using prior to that, because they makes them feel good, they're going to attribute it to that method. Their lucky socks, lucky rabbit's foot, whatever. And the same thing applies to prayer. In the prayer studies we've done, we found out that the rate of healing is equivalent to random chance in every other society, and the prayers didn't really have an effect. But the thing that is taken into consideration is we don't know what causes spontaneous remission. Like, it's a strange thing. It happens in lots of diseases. It's probably due to some kind of genetic mutation in the disease that causes the cells to mutate and die, and we just don't understand how it happened. And there's lots of those, lots and lots of those. And I think that in order to rationally believe it was due to the prayer, you'd have to do it to show that the prayer has a higher than chance effect on the rate at which it happens. And if you can't do that, I think simply having a profound experience that you can't explain wouldn't be enough.
All right. And like I said, I'm always into the concept of understanding a little bit more on it. And there are times that you're like, hey, we did a prayer request, the person died anyway. My mother, perfect example. Today is the 6th anniversary of her passing. And I poured out my heart to the audience. Pray, send God, send Buddha, send Ronald McDonald, whoever you believe in, and it didn't take for my mom. It did make me bitter against religion. I don't understand why these things take place. And of course, we comfort ourselves with the, God has a plan.
God
concept.
works in mysterious ways.
Right.
Oh.
We want to pigeonhole again and put things into quaint little boxes of, this is understandable to me, this is not. That's what I said when I talked to your producer about booking me. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to come on and try to sway anybody into believing, because I don't even know what I believe. I know that I have weird experiences. Sometimes I like to take them on face value because magic is fun. Sometimes I want to push further, and no, that can't be real. What I just saw is not real. And I want to know how that illusion took place. How did I trick myself? How did multiple people see this? I can't explain away some aspects of technology where, people have videotaped something walking out of a room that looks mysteriously like my mother walking out of a room. And 10 seconds later, she codes in the room and she's gone. How did that happen? What was that visage that appeared to walk out of that room? And that didn't happen with my mom. I'm just giving an example, which has been shown online repeatedly, strange things like that. And again, we are fallible as a human being, as a species, and we make mistakes every day, and we mishear things, misunderstand, misrepresent. And that's never been more prevalent than in the Mandela effect. Right? I love the Mandela effect. We started talking about it years ago, but I called it the who brought Kirk Douglas back from the dead before it got the Mandela effect, because I remember Kirk Douglas dying in the 80s, and that son of a gun lived to be like 103 and just died a few years ago. But I remember specifics of that. But I also know that there's things that I've seen that may have forced me to believe something differently. And because I was half paying attention, which is what we do in our lives, and misunderstanding those moments. The Berenstain Bears. Well, how do you explain that, Dave? Well, there's videotapes with the cover that says Berenstain Bears, and when you take it out, the label instead says Berenstain Bears. That's how, because even the printers make mistakes, and then we see both, and we remember one more than we remember the other, and that leads us down a false narrative path as well. But I love I love examining those concepts and seeing where it goes. When we were talking about religion,
the Mandela effect, I really like that one, because I always had this memory of Sinbad in the Shazam movie. That was
Shazam, yeah.
And then you actually look into it. He never made such a movie. It was actually Shaq. Shaq did it, and everybody remembers like that one guy in that movie, and it was hilarious that when looking it up was completely just a false memory. Such an interesting effect for sure.
Right. And look, Woody Allen affected our memory of Casablanca going forward with his movie Play It Again, Sam, a line that was never uttered in the movie, right? Casablanca. We have these memories because of the way they're shaped. Even a great example, Bruce Springsteen was just on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. And Jimmy Fallon said, so I've got to ask you, everybody says that there's this lyric, and it's the screen door slams, Mary's dress waves or sways. And Bruce Springsteen brings out his album. He goes, I am meticulous with what I do. And my albums, my covers, every word printed. And I will tell you that for almost 50 years, I've been singing Mary's dress sways. And he opens it up and it says Mary's dress waves. And he goes, obviously this is wrong. And he started laughing. And when you listen to the song, you hear him say Mary's dress waves, but it's mismembered, and we make those kind of mistakes. So that's why I said I don't claim to be an authority. I will say I'm, people will label me as a paranormal expert simply because I've spent 17 years in the field investigating and doing things. I never claim to have the definitive answer. I will try to button things up for people to try sometimes to make them feel better about the situation, but we can never definitively say this is what took place. I can tell you this is what your experience was. This is what we did to try to remedy it. I hope it helps. And, keep in touch. And I know that there are times that I've taken phone calls from somebody who's like, I think I have a demon. And I had a paranormal team come in and they caught a growling sound. And when I listened to the recording, it sounds like somebody's stomach grumbled while they were recording. Nothing menacing. You hear them talking, and all of a sudden you hear in the background, and then they've now deemed this place is infested with demons. And I told the lady, I said, okay, well, tell me, why do you believe that you have a demon? And she said, well, I've got a wall of collector's plates, and in the center, my crown jewel was my great-grandmother's plate. And I was sitting here one day, and it flew off the wall and shattered. And I said, okay. She goes, yeah, it broke. I said, okay. And? Well, it was my great-grandmother's plate. And I said, okay, did it make like a 666 pattern with the shards? No. Did it break into like a pentagram? No. Did the shards jump up and try to impale you? No. I said, then why do you think a demon did this? Well, because it was my great-grandmother's plate. And I said, all right, just bear with me. I'm not mocking you, but I want you to imagine roll call in hell today as Lucifer stands in front of his minions and he says, all right, today we're going to have a good day. You over there, you're going to go T-Jump and you're going to raise gas prices through the roof by breaking a pipeline. And you, Dave Schrader, you're going to go start a war in the Middle East. And you, Larry, you're going to go break great grandma's plate. I said, you just realize how insane that sounds, right? And she started laughing. And I said, so is easier to ascribe the fact that maybe it was mishung, or maybe the plaster gave way, maybe the hook wasn't right, or maybe somebody came through and dusted it and pivoted one of the little hooks wrong. Maybe it just fell off the wall. And she goes, I don't see how that would, I've it's been there for 50 years. And I said, all right, well, let's go to the supernatural. Where did you get the plate? My great grandmother. Where did she get it? She got it from her mother-in-law. Okay. And what was their relationship like? Oh, she hated her mother-in-law. I said, okay, so maybe your great grandmother showed up and said, why do you still have that plate? Knocked it off the wall. And she laughed and she said, that makes sense. It's what people want to believe. It's what people, she didn't want to believe she had a demon. She was terrified because somebody planted that. So I just replaced the concept of demon with your great grandmother just didn't like it, and it fit her parameters of her belief system. And lo and behold, she never had another paranormal example again. In my heart of hearts, I don't believe it was paranormal at all. But I also know she wasn't going to accept that answer. So sometimes, like a doctor, you give the placebo and everything's fine. That's how this field is done. And because of that, it makes me question everything, even my own experiences constantly. But it sure is fun.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a lot of value to helping people who have strange experiences and can't explain them, and working with them to talk about the different possibilities. I definitely think there's a lot of value in what you do in that aspect for sure. We do have some questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Sure. If I could mention one other thing, I will say this. I've met and worked with a lot of mediums, and there are some that just astound me to no end. I can't figure out the illusion of what they're doing. And to me, that's pretty real. That's pretty amazing to see some of the stuff. And I've set some up knowing that, that this isn't a plant of theirs. It was a plant of mine. I knew it was going in, and they still nail stuff that I just cannot wrap my head around. And then I sit there and I watch others that are cold readers. And then I have to ask this, okay, science has therapy, and it will cost you sometimes tens of thousands, if not more, to lay on somebody's couch and hear therapy for years and not really ever get better. But I've watched in one cold reading session, when I can look at you and go, T-Jump, there's a male here with you. I feel like he's like a father or perhaps a grandfather. Does this make sense to you? You should know, man, he is so proud of you. He is so proud of what you've accomplished and the fact that you push and you question, and you're not a lemming. You're not a sheeple that just goes along blindly and believes everything people tell him. He thinks you're amazing, and you need to keep that up. But remember to take time for yourself. Okay, T-Jump, make sure to take time for you and enjoy your life. Oh my God, I've watched those people walk out, and in 10 minutes of a cold reading, they don't need to lay on a couch now because they got the closure they needed.
Yeah, I think that I agree with a lot of that. I think therapy is completely a worthless waste of time.
Agreed.
It does nothing, because mostly it's just,
we have common ground.
It's meant to like change you and make you fit the world, which is the wrong way to do it. And another thing is that I think one of the reasons why religion is so incredibly successful and permeates the entire world is because of exactly that thing you just mentioned. This idea that there is this all-powerful, loving being who really cares about you and gives you meaning and purpose does make you feel more comforted in a lot of ways. And so even if it may or may not be real, the fact that it has a real impact on your psychology and makes you motivated and confident in things is definitely real. And so that can be significantly more powerful and a better medicine than acknowledging reality in many ways. So even if it was false in that example.
Sure.
So we do have some questions. Super Squid Hunk asks, what is your favorite paranormal conspiracy theory?
Paranormal conspiracy theory? I don't know. To me, those are two different things. I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories because I don't like going down rabbit holes that just depress the living hell out of me. And when I realize the government's trying to kill me, my neighbor's trying to kill me, the post office is trying to kill me, I be honest with you, I've stepped away from that. I used to do true crime podcast as well, True Crime Tuesday, and after doing it for 10 years, I had to just step away because, man, there's so much darkness you can absorb before it just starts affecting you psychologically. So I'm conspiracy, the Kennedy assassination, only because my birthday is November 22nd. He was assassinated on November 22nd. So I've had to share my birthday every year with it. I've thought so many different theories on it. And then I was lucky enough to get to sit down face to face with Lee Harvey Oswald's lover. And she had reams of proof that she was who she was and that she had this relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald, and that she reshaped a lot of my thinking because, again, she was right in front of me. And that's a more tangible moment. So it kind of made me feel like, well, I think there's definitely more conspiratorial to this, and that he was a patsy. I don't think he was necessarily involved in it. I think Oswald was assassinated because he went to the government and said, there's somebody going to try to kill our president, and they hung it on him. And that's just because of the conversation I had with this woman and what she was told by Oswald prior to his assassination. So that, to me, is one of the more fascinating and interesting elements. May not be right, but it's just as good a theory as every other one that's out there. Paranormal conspiracy. I don't believe the Amityville horror house is haunted. I am good friends with Christopher Coratino, the son that lived there, Christopher Lutz. I believe, if anything, it was tied to the family. I believe that there was, his stepfather, George Lutz, was doing some dumb things that included drugs. And I believe that affected and impacted the entire family. So that'll be my answer on conspiracy there.
Mine is the Moby Dick making the predictions of all the different people being assassinated, like Lincoln and things. That one was pretty good.
Well, then I'd have to say the Simpsons are even better than Moby Dick.
Yeah. It's also good.
And you can't dismiss that, T-Jump, because that's insane, the stuff that they predicted. And I love that they're like, slow your roll. We've been doing the show for 35 years. We're always looking at trends, and it's pretty easy to assess something that might happen in our future. So we just throw it in. It's not predictive. It's science fiction until it's not, right? I mean, it was science fiction that we would have a flip phone communicator. And then what did cell phone makers do? They wanted to create a flip phone communicator. So did Star Trek predict the future, or did Star Trek influence the future?
Yep, for sure. But
maybe Trump watched that cartoon and said, I could do that. I could go up and down on an escalator and wave to people and run for president. I'm in.
It was a great marketing ploy for sure.
No doubt.
Sebi asks, who is the most intelligent writer you've ever read?
To be honest with you, I really enjoy the articles from Dr. Michael Shermer. I've read through Skeptic Magazine. Because of his fascination with this, and not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but giving you a good mental picture of how we're fallible, and giving examples to prove that this is how the brain works. So I'm fascinated by that entirely. And I have friends that are magicians and illusionists that will show me how easy it is to trick the brain. And I think that's amazing. But I love Shermer's writing. I don't know. Like I said, so much of it I go into for entertainment, a good scare. So that's kind of the concept I'm in. I like books, Norman Vincent Peale and some of the other motivational speakers, because I do enjoy having people help reshape your thinking and get you into ways of examining things outside of your comfort zone.
I'm going to go with Dr. Seuss, the greatest rapper ever. Winston's mom asks, question for the guests. Have you been to the Thomas House in Red Boiling Springs, Tennessee? What was your freakiest experience ever? Why?
No, I have not been there. Freakiest experience. Gosh, I don't know. I've had so many strange things occur. When I went to Isetti Ranch in Washington, in Trout Lake, Washington, and saw something fly across the sky, I cannot begin to understand. And I'll tell you that when I witnessed it, it looked like a bad 1980s movie video effect. And I ran towards it, throwing rocks between the trees, because I was confident I was going to hear a scream. And there wasn't one. And I walked all the way through. I can't explain what I saw. To me, that still goes down as one of the freakiest things I've ever seen in my life. It looked like a giant blue flying manta ray in the sky. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, I experienced that recently too. When I saw the crash in Texas of the two planes, I was like, that looks a lot like CG. I can't, is that real? Can't
Right.
tell.
Isn't that so strange? I said, we're now at a point in history, and I was just talking about this the other night. We're at a point in history where if I show you a picture of Bigfoot or a UFO, your first answer is going to be, why is it always blurry? That's really a crappy quality. And if I give you a picture of them crystal clear, well, it's obviously fake. Look how clear that picture is. This is photoshopped or somebody in a costume. We're at a point where we're not going to believe or we're going to question no matter what. I love that believers question the really good shots, but not the blurry ones. And they're so predisposed to that's what evidence looks like that when they see something really clear, let's throw that away. It's funny, right? It's a strange dichotomy of the world and our brains are in and how we accept things.
Yep, for sure. Pi Sorrow asks, why is it so hard for people to understand that unseen things are at play in the universe?
I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't think it's so hard for people to examine that. That's what they've made an entire industry on it, and people watch and read and listen to shows that discuss it all the time. And even you said at the beginning, why can't it just be something natural we don't have an explanation for yet? Right? I think that's a much more common effect than other people are giving it. But when you're behind a shield of skeptic or cynic or believer, it's another separating tool. And really, you're not a skeptic, you're a thinker. You're a believer of what you know to be real. But you're that until you have an experience you can't explain away and is profound and changes you. Then, like Dr. Eben Alexander was an interesting example, right? Neuro brain
Scientist.
surgeon,
Yep.
yeah, scientist, and an atheist, and has a near-death experience, and suddenly touts the existence of God and heaven and the afterlife. Skeptic is just a believer that hasn't had an experience yet that they they can't get over.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the opposite. I think we have a proclivity to actually think or to assert things are at play at the universe that we can't see. I think it's a problem we have. Slicey Slicer asks, what do you think ghosts are made of?
Usually it's going to be like that marshmallow fluff with a little bit of stardust sprinkled in. I don't know what they're made of. I don't know. I don't know. I've seen things I cannot wrap my head around. I know that the eyes are fallible, especially in low light settings. And I know that we make mistakes all the time, but there are things I've seen I can't make sense of. And the one or two things that I think I've touched, it's not like they left residue I could test. I don't know.
I think I've actually thought about that as an interesting question for a while. If we were to see a ghost, how would we explain it in the context of ontology? Like, what is it made of? And if souls existed, what would that mean in the context of reality? Because I think I would still potentially classify them as just natural substances of some kind. What would it mean for something to be a supernatural substance? That means it has to be made of a different kind of thing, not fundamentally particles and waves or something along those lines. So it's an interesting question to think, what would it mean for ghosts to exist, and what would it mean for them to be supernatural?
And if we did finally pinpoint what it is made of, that would then open up a new part of science to us. That means now we would go looking for that type of material. Then maybe it's not supernatural. Maybe it is an element that will allow us to see more of this phenomena that always exists around us. We're just blocking it out or not noticing it as much.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would love for magic to be real. Harry Potter, I would love to be in Harry Potter. And so I hope we do discover that one day. Tim asks, does he consider AI art paranormal? I don't know what that means exactly.
Oh, it's pretty cool. Go treat yourself. You can go to these sites where you basically type in the parameters of what you want. You go to an AI site, and I type in ghosts at this house, and it kind of all of a sudden it creates an image which eerily looks like the owner's photograph. And how would the AI know that? Because I didn't tell him it was T-Jump. How did they know that what is in that house looked like you? So there's some of that. There's some really cool video. They've now started doing music videos for songs that never had music videos, and they've typed in the parameters and let art create it from the imagery that it's told. And it's whatever its imagination creates, which is pretty spectacular. So I would love to actually test more with the AI art in a location to see what it uncovers and puts together. But again, I would have to be confident the GPS is not turned on, that the internet is not turned on, and that it's a self-contained software on my computer that has no way of telling where I'm at and pinpointing things that it could reference from my research to create something that it thinks I want to see. Does that make sense?
Put it in a Faraday cage.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Benjamin Thomas Blodgett asks, we know our brains constantly make mistakes. What is the way you differentiate between imagination and reality?
I don't. I have no way of knowing exactly. That's why I said I question everything, even my own experiences. Some of them I behold as truths. My visitation for my grandfather, obviously a grieving mechanism, but so much more than that to me. It was so much more real and discernible from any dream I've ever had. And it comforts me to just believe my grandfather came back to visit me. So that's how I'll just maintain that memory. But that's the problem. Our brain doesn't know how to discern between a real and a vividly imaginative experience.
Charles and Solo asked the same question. Thanks for the question, Charles. And Thelemic Magic asks, can you ask if any of the mediums are prepared to do the James Randi challenge?
I think that's a great question, and I have pushed friends to it, and I have read some of Randy's challenges before, and I know a few people that were prepared to do it. And I will say this: Randy is a showman. I don't think Randy was ever prepared to pay out $1 million, even if Jesus Christ himself appeared in front of him and started handing out loaves and fishes. Randy would have found a loophole because he wasn't going to pay that $1 million. I saw him set forth, and in our first season on the air, there was Lou Gentili, who was a radio show host and an EVP, electronic voice phenomena specialist. And he always wanted to do the Randy challenge and swore he could beat Randy and show him how to record these ghost voices. Randy kept changing the parameters of the test. So I got Randy on our show. He said, no, I will agree to exactly that contract, and he will back out and find 100 reasons why I won't take it. I'm like, no, that's not true. And sure as hell, Lou Gentili backed out of every opportunity to take that test. Then there have been mediums who have read the contracts that they sign or send to them. And Randy does keep changing the parameter of what he wanted and expected, even though he said, this is it. If you agree to this, we'll do it. And they said, okay, let's do it. And he goes, but I also need this and this. And they're like, okay, fine. And then they're like, this guy's never going to do it. He doesn't take this seriously. He's just going to keep dicking with us. So they didn't bother taking it. That's an easy out for them. But I did read the different emails and contracts that he would send out. So there's that.
Gotcha. Logan Fisher asks, do you have a line that you will not accept a certain explanation due to its potential for harm?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't mind if people go to a gallery reading, they spent $50, $100 to go in, and maybe in that 5 minutes they can connect, it sets their life on a better path because they got something that they wanted to hear and it makes them feel better about life. But I do have a problem with people that, oh, T-Jump, there's problems in your future, boy. Send me a $200 as a this, and then they burn the money for you with a candle, and that freed the first demon, but there's more that need to be taken care of. And the people that have fleeced people over and over and over for money, and yeah, I mean that's ridiculous and a charlatan, and I wish did not exist.
Jesus said, I need a new private jet to spread the word.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's I will tell you this. I believe the reason that there is such an uptick and swing in the paranormal and interest in spirituality is because church up after 9/11. People returned, if you remember, T-Jump, they returned to church in droves. It was the highest that they'd seen people come back to church in decades. And people went looking for an answer and looking for leadership. And the church leaders saw a big crowd and they started doing more tithing sermons instead of trying to bring peace to people's mind, instead of maybe weaving more of the philosophy of religion and how to get past this. They talked more about why it's important to give to the church, and it turned people away in droves. Paganism, Wicca, so many different religions saw a spike in people turning to them because people just wanted to feel comfortable again, and mainstream religion failed them miserably. And that's, again, not me picking on religion overall. It's just, I know this for a fact. I went to 4 or 5 different churches in my area after 9/11 seeking answers myself, and just watched them fail miserably, one after another, with not speaking the word of God, speaking the word of man, which is give me, give me, give me.
For sure. Colin Six Hitter asks, has Houdini ever got back to us as promised?
Yes, twice. I don't know. I don't believe so.
Slicey Slicer asks, asking if he thinks the government is hiding ghosts from us.
No. And okay, you were talking earlier about what conspiracies. Here's a weird conspiracy. I've been told by many people that the government is hiding Bigfoot from us. They don't want us to know. And I'm like, to what end? Why?
People are just gonna raid the national parks and just destroy them.
Right.
It's protection of the national parks.
I believe logging companies would lie to us, because if you prove that there is a creature like that
endangered
in its habitat,
species,
right,
yeah.
You can't tear it down. But I don't believe the government would lie to us about it. Well, the government needs paper and trees, don't they, Dave? They need wood, don't they, Dave? So I just, to me, that's the most ridiculous paranormal deal, is that the government's hiding Bigfoot from us. Yeah, I don't think But here's an interesting thing. There are unsealed letters and documents from former presidents who've talked about the ghosts in the White House, and they don't mean it in just a parabolistic way, that they've witnessed and seen things. That's interesting. There are staff members that share that. But again, with that said, everybody wants to be remembered for something, and everybody wants to inject themselves into history. So if I'm the one that came forward to tell you about the ghost of the White House Rose Garden, I will forever be associated with that ghost story. So I will live on forever because Dave Schrader told that story.
For sure. Sebi asks, what are your opinions on Ed and Lorraine Warren? I don't know who they are.
The Conjuring movie series. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Ooh,
right? Yeah. They're based on their cases. I vacillate on this. Listen, I had a chance to interview Lorraine Warren numerous times. She was a sweetheart. She was always just a beautiful, wonderful soul to me. We had great conversations. I've also talked to authors that authored their books about their real experiences. And the authors have come forward to tell me that, they would be on site to watch this take place. And then I'd be like, okay, go write us a chapter about that. And the guy's like, a glass moved on the table, man. That could have been condensation. And I hired you for a reason, man. Go write the story and make it scary. So I'm taking the word of one person against another. Which one probably is telling the truth? Why would the author lie now? And it was interesting that Ed and Lorraine would hire horror novelists to write their real life experiences. That's interesting. When the second Conjuring movie, The Enfield Poltergeist, came out, I was talking to Guy Lyon Playfair, who is a part of the parapsychological group in England, the studies for parapsychology and such. And he and his friend were the two that were the main investigators on that. And I asked him on the air before the movie ever came out, I said, so they're making a new movie called The Enfield Poltergeist. Did you ever actually work with Ed and Lorraine Warren? And he said, no, they showed up, I think, for 2 days during that, but everybody came during The Enfield Poltergeist. Celebrities, musicians, everybody came through that house. And he said, and Ed Warren pulled me aside and said, we can make a lot of money on this story. And Guy Lyon Playfair threw him out. But Guy Lyon Playfair also made a lot of money selling his books and telling the story, and documentaries and TV movies made about it. So everybody's got skin in the game. It's impossible for me to say. I never got a chance to talk to Ed. Sadly, he was already in kind of a comatose state by the time that I was introduced to them. And then he passed away shortly after my first interview with Lorraine. As a matter of fact, during my interview with Lorraine, at one point she had to get up to go turn off an alarm that was blaring, I think, with Ed in the other room. I can't say I wasn't there. I'm friends with John Zaffis, Ed Warren's nephew, and I love John to death. And he tells me these things existed, and he's my friend, so I'm going to take him at his face value. But I can't weigh in on somebody I never actually got to sit down and talk with or investigate with.
Gotcha. Blaster Master asks, if we have an experience I can't explain, isn't the reasonable conclusion that it's just that, unexplainable, rather than conclude it's something like a ghost or whatever?
Sure. Yeah. And we talked about that at the beginning of the show. Yeah. However you want to accept it. And for you, it's easier to just say, oh, that's interesting and unexplainable. To me, I like to think it's a ghost or a UFO or a Bigfoot, and so do other people. So we all compartmentalize the things as we were brought up believing. I keep mentioning Dr. Michael Shermer. I was on a TV show called Paranormal Challenge, and this shows you kind of the stupidity of production companies. Sometimes they don't know what they have when they have it. As we're filming a scene, Dr. Shermer created an experiment, and we're like, sure, but wouldn't it make more sense if we're going to try to do this to eliminate false positives? Shouldn't we add this? And he looked at Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures and myself, and he said, wow, that's impressive. You guys are outthinking me on this. Yeah, you're right. That would be a much better experiment. They didn't air that. They also didn't air the scene when we were watching the monitors and something weird happened on screen. And Michael Shermer said, what the hell was that? And I looked at him and he goes, I can't tell you it's a ghost, but I don't know what the hell that was. And they didn't edit that, or they didn't air that part. And why, I still don't know. I'm completely baffled. But it exists. It's on film, and I'd love for the network or that company to put that part out there, because God, that's just a cool moment that I love that he was like, whoa, what was that? To see the excitement in a skeptic's face. And he said, listen, there's nothing I want more than to believe we continue on and that there are ghosts and Bigfoot and aliens. I want that to be real. Who doesn't want that to be real? Like you want Wizarding World of Harry Potter to be real. Who wouldn't want that magic in our lives? But you just accept it for what it is. And it's, unexplainable. But we want to explain it. We can't not explain it. You want to explain it with science. I want to explain it with the supernatural. It's because we can't just leave something hang there, right?
I would love to have that footage. I can put it onto a short and get millions of views. That would be beautiful.
Oh, trust me. If I had that footage, I would have done that years ago already. But yeah, it's great footage. Great footage. As a matter of fact, they don't air the show now. I should reach out to them and see if they could give me the raw footage from that final episode and see if I can, because that was our final episode of Paranormal Challenge. I would love to get it. And you could talk to Dr. Shermer. He won't deny any of what I just said to you. It's a cool moment, but like you said, but I'm not going to go and say it's a ghost. That's unexplainable. I don't know what the hell that was.
Yeah, please do contact them and let me know so I can totally copy it and put it on my channel, because that would be awesome.
You got it.
Pissarro asks, has Dave ever come up Dr. Luc Montagnier's work on water memory with unseen vibration intelligence?
Yeah. I don't remember the name. I'll be honest with you, because you could have been Dr. Jean-Luc Picard. You could have thrown out there. I know the work, and I've read work on water memory, vibrational intelligence. I've seen people talk about different elements of that. There are people that speak to their food and their water before they drink it to infuse it with positive, and they feel that ingesting it then makes it better. That's just one element of it. But yeah, that's why a lot of people believe hauntings take place, especially in areas where there's a lot of water nearby. Is it elevating the experience? Does the water hold some kind of magnetic resonance towards what took place there that was witnessed? Although I try to remind people there's this thing called the sun, and it cooks that water, and the water goes up into a vapor form and eventually rains back down and moves through the sky. So I don't know that it would remember, because that water's probably been replaced as many times as the cells in my body. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's like homeopathy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Except for the stuff I sell, that's real.
Yep. Yeah. I think there was this joke that said every particle of water that has been dissolved, one of them, or in every glass of water is a particle that has gone through some old British guy's stomach or something because of how many
Right.
particles are in your body. I think that's a pretty funny joke. Because if water had memory, it'd have to have a pretty big memory for all the things
Yeah.
that it's done. Free Abdurrahman asks, please ask him what he thinks of jinns in Islam.
I don't know enough about it. I've interviewed a few different people. Rosemary Ellen Guiley was big into the jinn. She wrote 2 or 3 books, I believe, on the jinn. I've spoken to a few guests who specifically spoke to that. I've spoken to people of the Islamic faith and Muslim faith that talked about it. And it's interesting. It's something that predates Christianity, that predates supposedly the angelic realm. These are ancient spirits and such. But to me, they're a catch-all, right? If you can't explain it away, it's a jinn. Or the jinn can be Bigfoot, can be UFOs, can be ghosts. It's like that Jeff Corwin special, he did on the Abominable Snowman, the Yeti, years ago. What he found was the word Yeti was actually a catch-all for the people in that area. He'd show them a picture of the mountainside and there was a snow leopard and they didn't know what it was, so they called it a Yeti. And then he showed a picture of the mountain with another animal on it and they didn't know what it was, so they called it a Yeti. And it's all identifiable animals, but if they didn't know it, their limited scope was it's a Yeti. So to me, that's kind of what the jinn feel like. And they mention the jinn in the Bible, but again, is the Bible a historical document or a book of parables for us to learn lessons from about morality and beliefs in their time?
Yeah. No, world flood, 100% literal, definitely happened.
Right. And there's no doubt about different elements of it in cities and countries and places, because they're continually finding those places do exist. Was there an ark? I don't know. If there was an ark, maybe it was a UFO that captured genetic makeup from all the different animals and beings, and that's what the ark was. Because there's no way you could fit 2 of every animal onto one ship unless you're taking the genetic makeup of those creatures. And why they screwed the unicorn over, I don't know.
And that would explain how the kangaroos walked all the way from Israel to Australia. That would help out if they had a spaceship.
Mm-hmm. Or they had a canoe.
Canoe, yep. Cindy Lou, mother of 2. Can you ask him if he's single?
Yes, you can ask me.
All right, great answer.
No, my wife will tell you I'm definitely not.
But she's not asking your wife.
I know. And I would agree with her 100%. I am not single. I'm a happily married man with 11 children.
Wow. That sounds terrible.
Horrible. Hey, man, we all have our limits, right?
Thelemic Magic asks, can he explain why there seems to be a correlation between geographical location and the perception of ghosts?
Please explain why there seems to be a correlation between geographical location and the perception of ghosts. Again, this all lies in theories and hypothesis of ley lines, of things like high levels of quartz or granite limestone, that the stone tape theory, that it actually, like we were talking about the memory of water, do these stones absorb the energy and replay it from time to time when there's tectonic activity? I don't know. That's part of it. I've often thought, maybe you know this answer, T-Jump, and you can answer it. I just posited this the other day. All right, so if we take the example that ghosts exist, and they exist in the electronic or electric magnetic field or force, and the shifts on our planet of the magnetic poles change. So would that explain why somebody died 4 houses down from me, and 30 years later, when the poles have shifted a little bit, the geomagnetic shield has changed position? It's now over my house. Would that maybe explain why the ghost now appears in my house and not the house 4 houses down? Does the geomagnetic shield actually shift and the planet stays in one place? I don't know that part of science. Do you?
Yeah, so our poles are flipping. Yes, that does happen.
Right.
But
but what I'm saying is if the poles flip, and let's say there's a geomagnetic shield around the planet, and the planet's moving, the shield is going the opposite direction or changing, whatever, would that theoretically, would the shield itself, the geomagnetic field, stay the same, just the planet's moved underneath it? So that would, if you were to believe in ghosts, would that explain why then it may have appeared to have moved?
Well, no, because flipping, usually it's like 180 degrees. It's not like it just goes a little bit at a time. It's more like 100% complete switch. The polarity of the whole thing flops, kind of a thing.
Well, I thought
So
I thought in recent years they've been talking about the fact that it's changed by 2 degrees. That doesn't sound like a complete
that's the
deal
tilt
to me.
of the axis of the Earth, kind of a thing. Um,
Okay.
but I don't
I
think
guess
so
I've
because
misunderstood that. The way I've heard it is that the magnetic poles have shifted 2 degrees, or this is, in minimal ways, but it's affecting it. So again,
yeah,
something
there
for
are
us all
little
to dig
shifts.
into.
There are little shifts
Hmm.
like that, but I don't think it would affect where the ghost was.
Hmm.
Because the magnetic poles and how they affect most everyday things is very, very minimal. So
Okay.
if there was a ghost that was affected by the magnetic poles, if you threw a fridge magnet at it, it would be completely dissolved by the fridge magnet because the fridge magnet is 1,000 orders of magnitude stronger. So it's
Right.
unlikely.
That's what I've said. What I would love to get is a degaussing unit, a portable degaussing unit. And that's we use those in radio to we call it bulk our tapes. So you'd record on a reel-to-reel recorder your music or your radio show and then play and it would run. And then you take that tape and lay it on the degausser and push the button, and the magnets were so powerful that it would erase everything on that tape. And I've often thought, what if I go into a haunted location with a degaussing gun? And if the ghost is always seen walking from this room into that room, what if I degauss the door frame? What if I change that magnetic principle? Would the ghost walk towards the door, stop before it got to the door? Or would it then suddenly appear on the other side of the door as opposed to walking through it? Now that I've changed the parameters of the experience, would the experience itself change? And if I did take a degaussing gun and the ghost of T-Jump walked at me and I turned it on and dispersed you, did I just kill a ghost, and will the right to afterlifers come after me?
Right. And it seems like because there is a magnetic field that covers the entire planet, and it can be like there's gamma ray bursts and different kinds of very powerful solar effects that we get hit with these kinds of things all the time.
Right.
Um, it seems like it would be really tumultuous for a ghost to try to live on this planet because it's going to get hit by all kinds of stuff that's just going to kill it instantly that it's traveling at the speed of light. Like if it goes too close to a nuclear reactor, oh poof, gone, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Space would just be like, cannot survive in space.
Well,
No
that's why
ghosts in space.
Beetlejuice made the most sense, right? You can't leave your house.
Yeah.
This is your place, because if you go out, then you're subject to what all the changes are in the world around you.
But I guess that
Listen,
would make
I've said this since I started. When I started my original show, and I carried on. We're here to educate, enlighten, and entertain. And educate is taken however you want it. Like I said, I let the stories breathe. You tell the story, I'll push and ask some questions about it, but it's not up to me to judge if your story is real. My job is to let you share it and see how many people around the world write into me afterwards to tell me about similar experiences. I'm fascinated by that element. The show has always been about entertainment. I feel the same about the TV shows I've been a part of. I'm hoping to bring answers and understanding and maybe closure to the people that I'm working with. But everything's got an entertainment element to it as well. So you have to accept that that is part of what we do. And I hope I know you've got intelligent listeners and viewers. I'm watching questions, good stuff. There's
there's a
people that
few,
are
one or
seem to
two,
believe,
one or
and
two
some that
probably.
don't. But I give you a chance to listen to the show, the Paranormal 60. I do a live YouTube show about on Mondays and Fridays, and then the audio is fed out to podcast apps all over. The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. The main thing I try to do is just have fun with it and make you think and make you sometimes feel uncomfortable with the stories and what occurs. I try not to always give a definitive answer because I don't know what they are.
Well, I was actually thinking that because that's scientifically testable. If we could say that if ghosts were in any way electromagnetic, we could say that the prevalence of ghosts would be more likely where there's less electromagnetic activity. So like underground in a neutrino chamber, there's no or very little electromagnetic activity. And so you'd expect less ghosts to die there potentially. Or
Mhm.
you could go to a ghost activity location, like you said, and start and then bring some kind of electromagnetic generator to test it, how it affects these things. So those are testable, predictable things that would be great to write a paper about and be like, this is something we could actually show may have some impact in this field. So
Well,
the
why don't we
science,
do this? Since you know about writing papers, let's write a paper on sound travel in paranormal. Because here's something I found when I was a kid. It was fascinating. I grew up in Medina, Illinois, and I used to hear parties downstairs. I'd turn off my light at night, turn on my fan, I'd go to bed, and I'd be woken to the sound of what sounded like music, but I couldn't specifically hear what music, and clinking of glass and voices. And I started talking to my neighbor kids, and they all had these same experiences. And we were all like, man, we have got the most hoppin' party ghost town in the world. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I thought, okay, here's an interesting thought. This was long before the advent of affordable air conditioning throughout your entire house. So we all slept with fans on, right? So fan is pulling the wind, it's creating a noise, right? That white noise template. Down the road from us, less than a mile, is the Medina Golf Course, which is always hopping with parties and things going on. Those sound waves are created and they go out, and the further away, the bigger and loopier the sound. So we're not going to hear it until it hits the eardrum of the fan. It hits the propellers of the fan and then comes through the white noise like a radio frequency. But because it's so loopy, we're not hearing specific sound waves. We're just hearing the generic of it. We're hearing some of the high pitched noises because those are on a different level and easier to hear. And the lower stuff, we're hearing the conversations. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? That's what I've kind of told myself probably happened. It makes much more sense than Native American party grounds that all of our houses were built on.
Yeah, I would say that the clinking sound is probably the people hitting the golf balls. That would make the most sense.
Well, it's at night. At night, we're hearing it. So when there were parties, and there were things at the golf course constantly at night.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense that there were noises, and those noises could be amplified under certain conditions and reflected under certain conditions. So like a car, if you notice, when it's coming towards you, it makes a lower pitched noise, and when it's going away, it makes a higher pitched noise, or vice versa, or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely sound effects that can happen that can make a mundane sound seem spectacular because it's reverberated in some really strange way.
Right.
Last question from Christopher Hatch. Do you miss Art Bell as much as me?
I do. And that was another thing. Do you know who Art Bell was?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Art Bell created the show Coast to Coast AM. Art was originally a political talker, and then he changed over with the show and created this template. He was the paranormal radio show. So when you're driving home, here in Minnesota from midnight till 4 a.m, you'd hear this great, low, raspy voice taking you through the world of the unknown. As tonight, we're going to talk about ghosts and this. And Art had a great way of letting you let the story breathe, and then he'd punch holes into it, and he'd want to know more. But he was a master of theater of the mind, and it's only since his passing that we've learned that things like his famous Mel's Hole story, or flying over Area 51, were most likely some of his shortwave radio buddies that were just calling in to create entertainment. But Art was a master at what he did. He did Coast to Coast for a number of years, and I was lucky enough to be a fill-in host for 5 years. I left after Art passed away, and his final show, Midnight in the Desert, they asked me to be the host. So I took over that show for 3 years before they sold the station. Sold the network, and so I'm the only guy in the world that hosted both Art's first and last paranormal show. So I'll always have that, and I'm pleased as punch and proud to be a part of that. But yeah, I miss that theater of the mind of Art Bell at night, and you would literally sit in your car grounded listening to these scary ass stories, because I didn't have a radio in my house, a record player, CD player. I wasn't listening to the radio, but I'd sit in my car riveted, because I didn't want to get out of the car, or I'd be so freaked out by what I'm hearing. I didn't want to walk from the garage into the house. So I love that element of Art, and I'll always miss him.
Cool.
Thank God his episodes still exist out there.
Yeah. Well, we have been going for about an hour and a half. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
Yeah, listen, if you have Discovery Plus or Travel Channel, I was on a show called The Holzer Files, where we re-examined case files of Dr. Hans Holzer, one of America's first ghost hunters. And we did 2 seasons of that. And I just did a show called Ghosts of Devil's Perch, where we were called to Butte, Montana to examine strange occurrences that were taking place there. My podcast is available every Monday and Friday night live on YouTube at the Paranormal 60 YouTube channel. And you can keep up with me and all the places I'll be by just visiting theparanormal60.com or paranormal60.com. And all of my information is there. All my social media links, my shows. You could stream the show right from the desktop there. So it's all available. But hey, I appreciate you talking and giving me a chance to come on and expanding my mind, giving me some things to chew on and consider. And I hope that even though we may not agree on a lot of the different aspects, I think there was a lot of common ground between us, and we're not that far apart from the fact that we know that there's weird stuff going on in the world. We just don't have an answer for what causes it.
Absolutely. We really enjoyed chatting with you. It was a great time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Take care. And thank you to all your listeners.